right, so thank you everybody for joining today. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. So we have in the room Sandrine with myself that I'm going to introduce, and we're trying to see how we can still let people in, but it seems a little bit difficult. So about, like today, the goal is actually to speak about basically e-commerce strategies in China. We're here to talk about like two specific notions. One is about public traffic, and one is about private traffic. So we're lucky today to basically have two experts in each of the field. Just hold on a second. We have a few more people coming in. And then, okay, we can continue here. Okay. So today we are very grateful to have Sandrine Zerbib with us. So she's the founder and the chairwoman of Full Jet. So she's a visionary, she's bold, she's resilient. I've known her for like about 8 years, I think now. When we started like roughly at the same time. So like Full Jet recently joined Baozun Group. So this is a huge news in the digital world in China. She's also the former president for Adidas Greater China. She's an advisor and mentor and board of member for apparel and sports company. So she's China business expert and always looking for large and challenging projects.
Now my turn. I'd like to introduce Aurelien, that many of you know. Aurelien is the co-founder and vice president of ITC. And as you have already noticed, and you will continue to see throughout our webinar, is communicative, is passionate, and is inspiring. He drives the business development and the expansion of IT consulting. He also assists C-levels and board of directors of many Fortune 500 companies to establish their digital transformation roadmap. He's a keynote speaker at Adobe Magento and at many other associations like AmCham. And is always very keen on meeting and learning from similarly entrepreneurial-minded people.
All right, so we managed to let in a few other people. So I'll let you introduce a little bit Full Jet, sure. Sandrine.
So Full Jet. So Full Jet is actually what we call a TP, but it's primarily it's a strategic and brand-focused industry experts specialized in developing online go-to-market strategies for premium and luxury brands. So in a way, we can say, to make it short, we are a boutique TP, and we've just joined the Baozun Group. So Baozun, on the contrary, is not boutique. It's the leading brand e-commerce, the leading TP, if you will, brand e-commerce solution provider in China with integrated capabilities encompassing everything from e-commerce value chain, covering IT solutions, store operations, massive resources, massive investments in IT. So the most advanced in technology related to e-commerce of all TPs in China. We got married quite recently, actually.
That's a fantastic news. All right, and moving forward to ITC. So, as mentioned earlier, I'm the co-founder and the vice president of ITC. So same as Full Jet, we're like a boutique agency, but like mostly focusing on the digital transformation area. So we have 3 offices with 60 people in China and Southeast Asia. And we've been servicing, like many different brands on their digital transformation journey, helping them with their IT system integration, setting up mini program, loyalty programs, marketing automation, and so on and so forth. So moving on to basically the topic of today, which is, first understanding the Chinese digital landscape, and then like we're going to tackle, like a few possible strategies. So actually, obviously, we get a couple of like super expert in the Chinese landscape. But it's always important to kind of like realize, like the key differences between China and the rest of the world. So in China, we have, like the Google, the Amazons, and so on. And in the rest of the world, we have the Google, the Amazon, and so on. And in China, we're going to have, the Baidu, the Tmall, the WeChat. And what's interesting here is basically to understand, like the different market shares of, like the total like e-commerce revenues globally. I mean, mostly in the West, which represent 12% of like the global e-commerce plus retail. And when we look at China, I mean, there's a lot of reason why this is like this, but China will represent 25%, so more than 2 times the e-commerce revenue generated in the rest of the world as a percentage. So, and one other thing, because today, like the goal is to talk about, how complementary private and public traffic can be. And when we look at public traffic in the US, that's going to represent 45, maybe 50, 55%, depending on like what we consider public versus private. But when we look at China, and especially, I mean, things are starting to shift, things are starting to evolve, and we're going to see why we get like so many opportunities for different brands. But in the past, it's been like kind of like an 80-20 or like even an 85-15. And so there's a lot of like slight evolution. Obviously, there are reasons why, like the splits is different in China and in the US. And the goal is like to try to understand it. And Sandrine, she's going to explain you a little bit more about it. So,
maybe
yeah, and
you can try
first,
Okay, so yeah, just a few words about this complex, but at the same time can be very rewarding e-commerce market in China. The first thing which I think is really important to understand is that the platforms, not only the platforms are big, but they are not specialized. Unlike the platforms in the West, it's the lines are completely blurred between e-commerce, social media, communication, and every platform tries to do as much as possible of all the things, I would say. So as a result of all this, number one, the e-commerce market is huge, okay? It's close to 1 billion internet users in China, which is 2/3 of the population. It's quite significant when we know that there is still a substantial rural population. So the rural population is also connected. It's also, in terms of volumes, massive, because it is actually more than the combination of the US, the UK, Japan, Germany, and France, which is quite impressive. It's very concentrated. You've got 90% of the B2C market in the hands of 3 platforms, and it's very competitive. So you've got massive platforms which have massive traffic, but also a huge number of brands on each of these platforms. So for instance, on Tmall, you've got 150,000 brands, which makes it obviously more challenging to get out of the crowd. And as a result, obviously, it's expensive. It's expensive to operate on these big platforms, particularly on the big e-commerce platforms like Tmall. But it's also expensive to acquire new users. The cost of customer acquisition on Tmall, for instance, has increased by 158% from 2018 to 2019. That's to set the picture. And to continue on, on setting the pictures, I think it's interesting to see that it continues to grow massively. So here is a slide that shows the growth of WeChat in a relatively short period of time. You can see that this happened over 9 years, which is pretty much nothing. And now we are reaching 1 billion active users with 20 million official accounts. And 50% of users spending up to 90 minutes per day on WeChat. And you will see later, and I think Aurelien will explain this at large, that WeChat is like a Swiss knife. It offers many, many opportunities and possibilities. Another picture of what a platform is really the fact that they are very complete ecosystems. I was saying earlier that they are not specialized and they don't want to be specialized. And I think a perfect illustration of this is Alibaba. Alibaba is a massive ecosystem where pretty much you can do and find everything. You find core commerce tools, like obviously Tmall that you may be familiar with, but there are other tools like Taobao, like AliExpress, for instance, like Lazada for Southeast Asia, like Tmall Global, and so on and so forth. You've got mobile media and entertainment with online TV, with video platforms. You've got local services like food delivery, for instance, or location of stores. And you've got also payment and financial service. And payment is quite big in China. Actually, you may know that mobile payment in China is massive. You've got marketing services and data management, logistics, cloud computing. So it's very complete ecosystems that enable the platforms, and particularly in the case of Tmall Alibaba, to offer a fully immersive experience to the users. So as a result of all this, as I was saying, you can do pretty much everything. You don't go on a platform, be it Tmall or be it WeChat or be it any other platform. You don't go there, find what you're looking for, click, buy, finished. It's not at all what you do. You go there to have fun, to watch some live streaming, to watch a video, to interact with your friends, to interact with the brand, to listen to a KOL, to play a game on a mini program on WeChat, and eventually to purchase something. But it's really an immersive shopping experience. And the fact of purchasing something comes at the end of all these activities. So you spend a lot of time on the platform, you get a lot of information on the platform on your favorite brands, and eventually you buy something, which is, I think, a very, very different feature from what we have in the West, okay? So now we're gonna know all the secrets of public and private traffic, thanks to Aurelien.
All righty. So I think, like probably a question that everybody has is like, what is public traffic? What is private traffic? So, and what are the differences between the two of them? And why, like today things are becoming, like blurrier than ever. So public traffic is everything where basically the brand is going to go on a marketplace and is going to compete, like for the attention of the users. And, like basically they don't have the chance to have 100% ownership of the data of the different users. And that's really one of the challenge, as Sandrine was, suggesting just earlier, like there's been, like a raise of like 150% year-on-year cost of like for acquisition of customer. So it's been a little bit of a challenge, and basically some brands, they have felt that, like things were a little bit hard for them. And they wanted to basically make sure that they were going to diversify their investment on platforms that are basically, like website, apps, in-store experiences, or in China, like the WeChat mini programs that were born like in 2017, 2018. And we're going to see that actually for a lot of brands, like WeChat, the WeChat ecosystem and the mini programs are like the go-to place for brands and in the end for consumers. So we're going to let in a couple of other people. Okay, continuing.
Okay, so this doesn't mean that we should turn our back to public traffic. Public traffic is a must for large volumes. And the big platforms are extremely important if you want to deal, or if you can deal with large volumes and large traffic, okay? So this is where you can really build your awareness, your online presence. You've got millions and millions of people who visit these platforms. I prefer to call them platforms than marketplaces, and I'll come to this in a second. You can participate in campaigns that give you even more exposure for your brands, okay? Big shopping events like the Double 11 that everybody has heard of. And you can figure out or pay for traffic that is going to the platform and how you drive it to actually your own store in the platform. One quick word here is that the reason why I don't like to call them marketplaces, because I think this is one of the fundamental differences with the Western platforms. They are not exactly marketplaces. Of course, Taobao is, but if you think of Jingdong and Tmall, they are not. They are truly platforms. They are virtual malls. So basically, it is a huge platform with huge volumes, but each brand has its own store and its own store environment on Tmall. Okay, so that's for the overall picture on the platforms. But I think importantly, let's zoom a little bit on Tmall to start with. Why on Tmall? Because Tmall actually still today represents more than 60% of the B2C market, e-commerce market in China. So it is absolutely fundamental to know about Tmall and to catch the opportunity of Tmall when you can, which is not necessarily for everybody, and we may discuss this later on. But it's a huge platform with 785 million monthly active users, with massive growth of monthly active users. As I said, very big market share, huge GMV, and a massive number of international brands. So this is really a platform where international brands open their virtual stores. It's the dominant player in the market with the GMV, which is today 10 times the GMV of Jingdong, which is the number 2. On Tmall, there is a portal called Luxury Pavilion that has been open for a little while, but has really increased its traffic and its interest a lot recently. So it is actually a portal that gives you access to a sort of like a special department, I would say, of Tmall, which is reserved for luxury brands. Now, these luxury brands increase every day, and we've seen an explosion of them, particularly with the COVID in 2020. In 2020, we've seen a lot of brands like Cartier, Piaget, Chloé, Prada. Who else has come? We've seen Gucci opening. So a lot of brands have actually entered Luxury Pavilion during the year of the COVID. And during the same year, we've seen that online has started to account for 33% of luxury sales compared to only 12% in 2019. So there is really now a place for luxury brands. So Jingdong is also trying to compete, but for the time being, we have to admit that the winner in luxury, online luxury, seems to be Tmall with Luxury Pavilion, huge increase and a lot of growth in perspective as well. So all in all, I would say if you can, you should really invest in marketplaces, or rather in platforms, because this is where it's happening when we're talking about volumes, significant volumes of sales. So number one, it's 80% of international brands use Tmall to initiate their market entry to China, especially e-commerce market entry. The GMV generated by Taobao Live, which is a live streaming platform inside the platform, has been incredible in 2020 with $350 million. As you know, the Double 11 is increasing and reaching incredible numbers every year. The last one was 70 or close to $75 billion. And it's also a very active platform with a lot of festivals. So it's not just the Double 11. There are actually 9 major events per year. There is always something happening on Tmall, as well as on Jingdong, by the way, which actually creates a lot of buzz, a lot of opportunities for brands to expose themselves.
All right. So thank you, Sandrine, for introducing the public, I would say, traffic. So now let's touch base on the private traffic. And this is a new trend. So this is something that really kickstarted. I remember all the marketers started to talk about it in 2018. Basically, the only goal, the former goal of WeChat was just to generate visibility and like maybe a little bit of interaction. And starting from 2018, actually WeChat started to become a revenue generator as well, and an area for data collection. So why private traffic is today important it is important for brands who wants to have like a total ownership of their traffic, their experiences, their data, for brands to be able to establish really deep connection with their customers and drive more sales, basically leveraging CRM, social CRM, marketing automation, and a very deep loyalty, and to as well like provide a very personalized experience to each of the customers. On WeChat, there are a lot of, like opportunities. We saw earlier that, like Tmall has a lot of users. Obviously, WeChat has a little bit more. Obviously, not everybody's on WeChat to shop, but we can see that if we provide them with the right experience, then we might convert them into shoppers. So we have 1.2 billion users as of like Q3 2020. 20 million registered official account and about 800 million monthly active users using WeChat mini program that were just launched 3 years ago. And then like we have a lot of different businesses that are leveraging WeChat Pay. So an interesting figure to have a look at is that 50% of the users are opening WeChat every 90 minutes, and they're spending a lot of time on WeChat, not only for shopping, obviously, but like for chatting. What we want you to focus on today is like, since basically the birth of the mini program, the amount of million of RMB that were actually spent on the WeChat, like mini program. First year was 600 billion RMB. The first year was 1.2 trillion. And the last year, like in 2020, that was 1.6 trillion RMB. Which represents, quite a substantial amount. 1 second. So why should brand overall like invest in social commerce? So as for today, 95% of the brands that are doing e-commerce in China have actually a mini program. Not necessarily an e-commerce one, but they have set a mini program. It can be for content, it can be for loyalty, it can be for drive to store. There's like different opportunities. We have seen that there is about $250 billion last year compared to 120 in 2019 that were actually spent on WeChat mini program. So we see that this is a place where that is successful in terms of driving revenues for brand. We're not here talking about like money that is transferred from one wallet to another wallet, but we're talking about here brands that are selling here. And for 1/3 of the users, the average spend per user per month was between $75 to $150 spend per month. And according to McKinsey, 25% of the users surveyed basically are thinking that social media is definitely the right place for them to buy. 2 other figures we want to have a look at is that as of August 2020, there were already 3.2 million mini program, which is huge. And overall 25% increase of the numbers of mini program that each and every single of the user is going to use. So basically what like brands are realizing in the market as well is that basically there is a need for deeper connection and a little bit of like a stronger loyalty. What's happening, and that's a survey that was conducted by Jing and the Digital Luxury Group, which like measure like the WeChat post open rate between 2018 and 2019. And what we see is that things are going down all the time. It's because users, they are getting bombarded with notification all the time from group chat, and basically they just see this and they click on it and then they don't even open it. So what it means is that there is like an overall like decrease in engagement. So what we're seeing earlier, there's competition on Tmall, but there's also competition on WeChat. It's not like a blue ocean where you're going to enter and things are going to be easy. So in order to compete against the other brand, in order to compete against the rest of the noise, brands need to work on like better engagement and have like deeper personalization and loyalty and ensuring the rest as well. So in order to move forward, brands need to clearly have like an identification of like who are going to be their persona and what kind of interaction they want to have. They need to define and map out their user journey. And then obviously, like this is, like an approach where we need to dig, like very deep, but really leveraging, like what we call omni-channel. So we're going to see a little bit later what exactly we're going to call omnichannel and how we can approach it. But brands need to think about how they can maximize each of their current asset before making additional, investment. They need to ensure that they're going to maximize this 48-hour window where they have the chance to, exchange, interact with each of the users when they are coming to their official account. And then obviously they need to work on implementing chatbot services, automated data collection, personalized menu, a clear tagging and segmentation strategy, and for both B2B and B2C lead scoring as well. And obviously, talking about WeChat and private commerce, we cannot forget about what we call WeCom, which would used to be WeChat Work. So there's been a lot of changes in terms of name. So WeCom is like the sister app of WeChat. It's kind of like the opportunity to be connected with your Slack and interacting directly with the users in WeChat. So it's an enterprise level solution. So there is 5.5 million enterprise already on it, and there's 130 million active users. And basically, WeCom has been competing against, like the Alibaba solution. But one of the reasons why a lot of companies are actually turning towards the adoption of WeCom is that WeCom can easily connect, like your entire sales team to where people are actually spending their time, which is WeChat. So a user in WeCom can interact with a user in WeChat seamlessly. And like when we're talking about the word of luxury and the word of retail, where there is like social selling, where there's clienteling, when we sell, like goods at an expensive price, or even in cosmetic or like in areas where the goods are going to be a little bit cheaper, like we've seen a major boom as like for brands using WeCom as a way to market their product and ensuring that the entire team is going to be, aiming towards generating revenues for the brand. And last but not least, like the WeChat search has evolved tremendously. So here we see, for example, on the right side, we see Blo, and like what we've seen, like the WeChat search monthly active users has reached more than 500 million users. So they're not only looking for brands, but brands now, they have finally the chance to display their content, to have their WeChat official account very easily visible, their mini program, as we can see on the right, easily visible, e-commerce links to other e-commerce platform, QQ Music. So it makes, like WeChat, as Sandrine was saying earlier, same for, Alibaba and WeChat, basically, those are becoming like operating systems that are so complete that people, instead of like going to Baidu to find information, they might look for WeChat here. So I'll leave the floor to you.
Well, no, I think what is important for you to understand is that Aurelien and myself, we're not competing. What we are really advocating is a hybrid strategy that uses all the platforms and particularly combines private and public traffic to get the most out of both models for the brands.
So basically, when we approach, like a China strategy, there is like everything that is related to private traffic. So all the market shares and how we're going to drive KOL, a TV commercial media towards that marketplace and leading to a purchase. But what we see as well is that there's obviously the physical stores. So, like earlier, like our, like definition for today is like how we can complement both public and private traffic, but we should not forget physical stores. Yeah. Retail is something that is crucial here. And that's why it's like part of like the equation. So physical stores are here. And the last but not the least is everything that is related to the private traffic.
The public traffic.
Private, public. So what's basically different strategies, brands will have different strategies, and they will have the tendency to bring the different users where they have the chance to actually maximize their ROI, maximize the loyalty, and maximize the amount of data they're able to gather for each of the users. So for some brands, actually, they're going to have like a better return on investment being on Tmall versus being on WeChat or on their own website. And some of them, step by step, like they will want to have like, healthy percentage instead of like maybe having an 80-20, they might, look forward to have like a 60-30 or something even like different? So we're talking about big brands that have been investing, heavily, like Nike, for example, on their .cn for, a longer amount of time. But, that's really what you're saying, the exception that is confirming the rule. And so like we need to take into like the equation, all those parameters of like, physical store, marketplaces, and the, like private areas, in order to really ensure that we can create that loyalty and we can have like a data flow that is going to be the correct one.
Yes, and what is important to understand is that somehow the brands need to be everywhere. The consumer is not different from one platform to the other. Overall, all consumers go on all platforms. They go on WeChat and they go on Tmall and they go into stores. So as a result, it's really important to understand the consumer journey in order to make sure we cover all the bits and pieces. So number one, consumers, they start by thinking about buying something, especially if it's something expensive. They think about it, they get some information on trends, they remember some experience or some experience of their friends. They also do some research. They actually do research both on WeChat, Douyin, Weibo, but also, of course, on .coms. But they also do research on the big platforms like Tmall or Jingdong, because it's full of information. And then finally, they start really going to platforms to make comparisons on price and sometimes also on service. Then finally, they buy, and then we enter into the loyalty loop. Another way to look at it, which is interesting, is the fact that the consumer journey is truly multidimensional. So there are many opportunities for brands to interact with their consumers. And as much as possible, it's important for brands to make sure that they are a little bit everywhere in these different touch points, from all the touch points that lead to consumers' understanding of the brand, of the history of the brand, the products, and so on and so forth, all the touch points which are more about advocacy, where friends, where KOLs will actually talk about the brand. Then obviously there are everything which is lifestyle related. So we will see later that some brands offer a very exceptional offline experience, including exhibitions on the brands, or even concerts sometimes. And then finally, purchase and repeat purchase. So all these touch points are important and we can't neglect any of them. So here I would like to rapidly, because we're getting, we still have time to look at this, to look at two brands and see how they work on all this. And both brands are doing very well in the digital landscape in China. One is Burberry. So Burberry has been, we know that worldwide Burberry is actually a pioneer in digital transformation. And today in China, they are close to 10% of their retail sales online. And Tmall accounts for 85% of these sales, which is quite significant. What they managed to do on Tmall is actually quite impressive, with $50 million US GMV in 2020, approximately, okay? But what is interesting is that in spite of this, they are actually on a lot of platforms and they explore a lot of the touch points we were talking about. Even though they do 85% of their online sales on one platform, they are actually on Weibo, they are on Douyin, they are on The Red, they are on WeChat. They also do the most out of their, obviously, their physical stores. And we're going to see that one of their stores is very special, their .com. They use not only the traditional e-commerce platforms like Tmall via Luxury Pavilion and Jingdong, but they also use some vertical platforms like Farfetch and Net-a-Porter. So they really make sure that they are visible in a lot of places where consumers go. So they leverage, obviously, their WeChat mini program, even though, as we saw, it's not where they do their biggest volumes of sales. And not only they leverage their WeChat mini program, but they have actually been extremely innovative in mixing on and offline via Tencent and WeChat. So they have actually partnered with Tencent to open what they call a social center in Shenzhen, where people get in, and it's completely seamless with their WeChat experience. So they use their currency, their social currency, to unlock some opportunities in the store and to gain some social currency in the store. This is quite unique. It's very new, very innovative, but it really shows you that we can go very far in terms of hybrid channels. They also do AR interacting mini program. They do this. What is interesting is that they also do this on Tmall and not just on WeChat, by the way. They obviously have also purely shopping, like e-commerce mini program on WeChat. And this doesn't prevent them to conduct similar activities on Tmall. So you see, they really go everywhere and they explore all the touch points, with also consumers being able to take pictures on WeChat. They can do the same, by the way, also on Tmall. Choose templates with their brand ambassadors. They leverage their celebrities, their KOLs, and they also create offline events, which in turn get back online through live streaming. Let's look at another brand, which is Mage, actually. Mage is also interesting because it's even more pronounced than for Burberry, the fact that actually their online sales are really happening on Tmall, with 98% of their online sales, and a very substantial proportion of their total sales online, which is now for them reaching somewhere between 35% and 40%. With significant GMV, as you can see, approximately $40 million US. Nevertheless, again, they explore all these touch points because it's fundamental for their consumers' experience. Although they do so much of their sales on Tmall, they are on all major social platforms, more or less the same we have discussed previously. They have their own .com, they have their stores, obviously, and they also explore other e-commerce platforms such as Jingdong, and they are on verticals like Net-a-Porter. Again, a very hybrid strategy, which is not only driven by where the brand does its sales. It's a lot about sharing, and particularly when we talk about their brand websites, instead of using it primarily as an opportunity to buy, they actually use it to expose their brands and to encourage their consumers to share as much as possible. So they have multiple entry to their websites, and then including WeChat. Actually, their WeChat account gives an entry to their .com, which is something very important that you cannot do with Tmall, by the way. And then they encourage people to share the website on both WeChat and Weibo. They also encourage people to click. Actually, there is a little icon on their .com to click and go to their mini program. So you see that here they create on WeChat a much more intimate relationship with their consumers, with newsletters, with services like clothing alteration, with memberships, with VIP programs, and so on and so forth, which obviously they don't do the same way on Tmall, because Tmall does not exactly offer the same possibilities. But this is where the hybrid strategy makes a lot of sense. They have a lot of volumes on Tmall, and they have this more intimate relationship with consumers on WeChat particularly, and this more intimate relationship in turn actually nourish the traffic on Tmall. And obviously, which is the last piece, but it's an extremely important one, it's also related to what they do offline. So both for events and for stores, they connect very deeply what they do on and offline. So when we say hybrid, it's private, public, and offline. These are the three key elements and the three key parts of the total journey that brands are working on. So let's take one example. They did an event which started online, a campaign which was My Dog. Actually, it's Full Jet that did this campaign. So we asked Weibo users to post photos of them with their dogs. And then the winner was invited to an offline VIP event, which in turn was actually something you could see online with KOLs through videos. Okay.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, so to finalize a little bit, we kind of like need to understand, how to articulate and how to build like all those infrastructure. So we understand that the Chinese, like ecosystem is a little bit complex because, like most of the brands, like they've been working with like Tmall partners. And basically they have an ecosystem that is in place, like with a logistic, with an order management system that is going to connect. So this is like at the right part where you see the logo of Tmall, JD, and everything related to the public traffic. So you already have like those backend systems that sometimes will belong to the Tmall partners, sometimes will belong to the brands. And then in order to grow, basically what is very advised is not to actually reinvent the wheel. Brands need to use the existing system and connect through APIs to those existing systems. And basically the element and the area which is going to be a masterpiece, a master coordinator of like all that omnicanality is very often going to be that order management system. That order management system, and we don't see it here, but is going to be linked to the retail, is going to be linked to the public traffic, and is going to be linked to the private traffic. And it's going to play a key element as well when it comes to the loyalty. And we see that in terms of different front end that you can have for your private traffic. You can have obviously, like the website, the mini program, H5, APPs, in-store experiences. So there's a lot of opportunities. But what we have seen in the last, like 1 year or two is the emergence of customer data platform. And those customer data platforms, what they are making is that like they're kind of like coming at the middle of all of this and able to basically gather information that are going to come from like the public traffic system, like the Alibaba CRM and like different details, but as well as like the WeChat ecosystem. So what you see is that brands are starting to have like a unique view on each and every single of, like the users and what is going to be their behavior on both like WeChat and as well as like the marketplaces. So we're starting to be in an environment that is omni-channel and where like public versus private, everything is becoming blurrier and blurrier. And so brands need to adapt to this and basically need to understand, like what KPIs are going to be important for them and how they're going to qualify, like their different revenues. So the key takeaways of today, and we're going to leave the room for a couple of Q&A afterwards, is that there is none one size fits it all, a magic formula. So we got a couple of questions just before this, like, should I start on Tmall? Should I start on WeChat? What is the revenue that is going to be necessary? So that's a couple of questions we just had before. So we're going to explore this. And there's never like a question, like an answer that is going to be just start this way or start that way. And it's impossible without being like, a consultant and taking into consideration so many parameters to make the right decision. Second part is that each of the brands need to understand what assets they have in hands and how they can actually maximize each of those assets. And some of those assets can sometimes and very often be, like global infrastructures that can actually be localized in China. That could save them potentially a lot of money as well. And the third part is that actually they're starting to have like a very blurry line between the private and the public traffic, and that brands needs to start to really have like that omni-channel approach, taking into account physical retail, private traffic, and public traffic altogether. Sandrine, you want to add something to this?
No, I think these are very important points. And again, it reflects the fact that we need to capture the consumer across all the touch points of its journey.
Very good. So we're going to start our Q&A session. So I'm going to stop sharing and then like put on the video again. So we have a question here from Cathy Wu. What is your opinion on the development of the WeChat video account? Just on that topic.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it's a very kind of like broad question. I think that obviously what we've seen is that live streaming, like one step at a time, and like we covered like one of the brand of LVMH actually last week, and basically live stream and videos within mini program. Now that everything can be headless, like you can have like a very seamless experience within a mini program. Having e-commerce, having store locator, having like everything related to those live videos. So it's actually becoming like once again like more and more seamless, and I think this is something that has like really that is going to move forward quite a bit. Like working on limited edition, working on the fear of missing out, which is one of the only way actually like WeChat and the brands are going to be able to create habits within user, is to create some sort of like limited edition and fear of missing out, in order to make sure that users, they're going to purchase one time, and then they're going to be able to understand them and retarget them as they move forward. There's another question from Romain Ress, which is, WeChat is also a platform. What is the data sharing model between Tencent and the owner of the mini program?
Well, you are the specialist, I'm going to leave it to you, but it's obviously WeChat, it's almost like your own website, just to make it very simple. With a mini program, you have control over your data, almost as if it was your own website, which is quite different from obviously the virtual malls.
So complementing what Sandrine is saying, Romain, I think this is a great question. So like the mini program is really like in the realm of the private traffic. Now, the most important thing is like what kind of system you're going to leverage. Are you going to use your own system, which is going to be open source, where you're going to have 100% of basically the analytics and the data, or you're going to use like a SaaS, a software as a service system, such as Yudzan or Weidian, in which you might have like a premium version where you're going to be able to extract some of the data, but you're going to be as well like again put in a data silo. So it's going to really depend on what kind of investment you're going to set forward. Mm-hmm. We had another question earlier on, and I think this one is actually best for Sandrine here. Okay. For a brand, what should be the threshold for the brand to say, hey, okay, I'm big enough, I need to jump, I'm coming to China, or I'm already in China, and what is the like expected revenue for a brand to say, hey, I can get on Tmall, because we saw Tmall is very expensive.
It's not, yes, Tmall is expensive both operationally, okay, because most probably you're going to need a TP. You need to pay fees to the platform, and as we discussed earlier, the customer acquisition on Tmall is actually extremely expensive, and it's increasing quite significantly every year. So because of all this, you go on Tmall if you have at least sales expectations that reach a certain level. It doesn't mean that you're going to have these sales on day one, but you have reasonable and data-driven reasons to expect certain amount of sales. I would say that if you cannot expect within the next 12 months to hit at least somewhere around 10 million GMV, maybe you're not mature enough, your brand is not mature enough for Tmall. And maybe you need to work on your brand. So I think that before making this decision, first thing, you need to see where you stand, but you also need to conduct an audit to be able to assess better if you have a chance to hit this mark or not. And this audit is going to be really some social listening. What's going on? How many notes do you have on the red? Who is talking about you on the different social media? On Taobao and Tmall, how many people are trying to sell your brand in parallel? And so on and so forth. So when you get a full picture of this, you have a better idea of your chance to hit this mark. What's the level of awareness you have? How much is going to cost you to increase the awareness? And then you can go for it.
And we have a great question here that is going to be actually, like a complement to what you're saying, Sandrine. There's a question here, which is, is it better for European luxury startup brands to start with WeChat because it's more cost effective compared to Tmall?
Well, better. Again, I think it's actually a recommendation I often have to small startup niche brands. if there is little or very little awareness in China, it is probably wiser, I would say, to start building your awareness using the possibilities of WeChat. It's more cost effective. You can use WeChat to build a community around your brand, to do product seeding, to attract some posts on your brand. And then when you get the awareness needed to go to the next stage, then you can start considering Tmall for bigger volumes. It is not necessarily always working this way, but I would say in multiple cases, it's actually a sort of progressive approach that works well.
We have another question here, and then I'm going to jump on your question, Devansh, afterwards. So the question is, how will logistic and Tmall store management with third-party agency work with mini program if they launch on WeChat? And this is a great question, and this is a question we are always, having. And, like coming back, like to one of the previous slide when, like we see, like the different system existing. One of the recommendation we made is actually not, again, to reinvent the wheel. Like you have like an order management system and you have like a warehouse management system that is going to be probably managed by your Tmall partner. So that Tmall partner could be, like the one managing your mini program afterwards in your future, or it can be built by another company. And this company can connect through API to your order management system, which is going to be actually your source of truth. And it's going to really ensure, like your stock management, your ERP, your finance systems, that everything is going to be correlated into one single area. And it's the same when you're talking about like the physical space where you're going to need to connect that order management system to a POS and actually work together. And like leveraging, most of the time it can be WeChat in order to create like some sort of like loyalty card and connecting, like all the system together. So answering that question, like you need to be very smart and you need to ensure that you're not going to have like a monster like with like 300 heads, and like having like a proper definition of like what system and how the data is going to circulate between all the system is key to the foundation and the success of each and every single project.
Yeah, I totally concur. And I mean, a good TP would actually propose to you a solution that enables you to integrate your order management system, which is fundamental because you need, I mean, for the hybrid strategy to work, you also need to think of integrated inventory.
Okay, we have one question here from Devansh. So, for Devansh, what is the view on public versus private traffic for brand new or nascent brand? Yeah, do they still need a hybrid approach? So once again, I think is like measuring like the assets that this brand has, and like based on those assets really having like some sort of like initial business plan. So coming back to the answer given by Sandrine, like thinking about like that 10 million threshold for like the next 12 months in terms of revenue, if it makes sense, yes or no. And then like depending on the brand, if like there's already like physical stores, or if they're like sister brand or like specific KOL partnership that can be leveraged, then everything needs to be taken into consideration, establishing a business plan that is going to bring or not like a return on investment for that particular part. So we have a question here from Max Henry as well. As other apps platform like Redbook, Douyin offer more entertainment and effective way to promote brands, products, and is still WeChat the right platform for marketing and selling in 2021? Maybe you're a little bit more expert than I can be on this.
First thing, it's a moving landscape. Okay, so things are not set in marble in any case. But I would say that even though Douyin, for instance, is obviously increasing and is now being quite aggressive in developing not only their own e-commerce functionalities, but even their own money, not money, I mean mobile payment solutions. It's not as mature as WeChat to start with. So it's interesting, but it's not necessarily a replacement. Okay, that's to keep in mind. Also, I would say that WeChat is a natural destination for premium and luxury brands. And it doesn't mean that Douyin is not to be considered. We have seen brands like Dior, for instance, opening an official Douyin account. again, it's all about having it all. It's all about as much as possible being where consumers are, and consumers who go on doing also go on WeChat and vice versa. So I don't think it should be an either or, except if it's really a question of ROI. When am I ready for Tmall? So it really should be about multiplying the touch points, being in as exposed as possible in different platforms. The only question really is for Tmall, are you ready or not?
So we have a question from Jacopo. Maybe Jacopo, you can help us, like going deeper into it, because I'm not 100% sure I get it. So which is the most appropriate in and out of platform investment for brand in a niche sector that needs to expand the market more than increase either market shares in it? I'm not 100% sure about this. Maybe.
If I understand the question, and I hope I do, it's really about the share of in-platform marketing investments versus out-of-platform marketing investments. So in this case, platform would be Tmall or Jingdong, and WeChat would be considered as out-of-platform investment. So I think there is, unfortunately, there is not a single answer to this. It really depends on your level of awareness. If your level of awareness is very high, you tend to go more on in-platform. If your level of awareness, and you not only you tend to go more on in-platform, but you also tend to reduce your overall investment, which is natural. And then it's no longer about awareness building. What you do outside of the platform is more about image and intimacy with your consumers than really awareness building. If it's really focused on awareness building, when you start from a very relatively low awareness level, you need to go out platform quite significantly before using too much of your budget in platform. That's the way I would put it.
We have a great question as well from Baris here. So a little bit long text. I'm going to try to read it, and we're going to try to answer it with Sandrine. So since media became shop now, what is the role of the physical retail, brick and mortar stores claiming suffering? They're not suffering because of e-commerce or mobile first in China, but they're actually suffering from not adapting to change. What is the change to live in mindset, only transaction focus of physical retail? Physical retail needs to be experiential and interactional to create loyalty on brand. So is it the right way to use your physical assets for engagement and delivering experience? Yeah, I think Barry's like...
He provides the reply, the answer in the question.
You already have the answer. So obviously, like we saw earlier that e-commerce was like 25%, but it's still like 75%. So obviously it's not because like one of the trend is going down that is like actually, that much suffering. People will still shop, like retail, people will still need that experience. Obviously, one is going up, one is going down a little bit, but I think that still need to have that consideration.
Yeah, but and also, as you say, there are still a lot of companies that treat their offline retail completely separately from their online retail, which obviously is not what the future is all about. It's really about making it more experiential offline, of course, but also as seamless as possible. I think that complaining that people go on store to finally buy online is a mistake. It's not something we should complain about. It's something we should work with. And the store plays a very important role in this journey where a consumer would go in the store and finally buy online or vice versa. And by the way, vice versa is very important in luxury. A lot of the luxury purchases starts online and finish actually offline. So the difficulty, obviously, and this takes to really revisit the way you work with your partners, is when you have franchisees or distribution partners. You need to bring your distribution partners in the game and to figure out a way of sharing some of the online margin. Otherwise, you're blocked and you can't evolve towards more verticality and more seamless experience between on and offline. And I would say that obviously the future is there. And again, two obstacles that we see. number one is, as I said, franchisees, distributors, but there are ways around this. There are tools offered by the platform to resolve this issue. It's a question of willingness, okay? But the other obstacle is actually quite often internal. It's companies that need to rethink their capabilities, their organization, and even their KPIs.
Yeah, I mean, very often we see competition between like the CDO, the CTO, the person in charge of retail. So yeah, definitely rethinking, you know, like the entire user journey and how, you know, each of the funnel that we saw earlier is going to actually feed off each other and having like an overall global strategy for this. We had another question actually from Benoit here. Do successful brands who are on both Tmall and JD work both platforms the same way in terms of content, engagement, target audience, products, range, etc.?
Most of the time they don't. And I would say most of the time I would advise they shouldn't. So number one, we need to keep in mind that although Jingdong is a very interesting platform, it doesn't offer as many tools as Tmall. But that's not really the point. The point is to say that, no, you actually use different platforms with slightly different assortments, targeting slightly different consumers and slightly different calendars. So typically, as an example, Jingdong tends to be a little bit more masculine, okay, and tends to be also a little bit higher end, except for Tmall Luxury Pavilion, higher end than Tmall General, okay? So based on this, you have part of your assortment, which is the same, but you have part of your assortment, and particularly the way you push your hero products is going to be a little bit different from platform to platform. But that's not only for Tmall and Jingdong. I think with, as we said, a hybrid strategy, you really need to think of what assortment you're going to present and what price strategy and what engagement you're going to have on each of the different platforms, including WeChat. So what WeChat, your own .com, Tmall, Jingdong, you're going to have different assortments and different strategies there. It's not 100% different, but it's partially different.
All right. So I think we're a little bit past our time. I see, you know, like we have a couple of questions related to OMS in China as well. Stella, we're going to get back. We can get back to you privately. You have our contacts. Or like, yeah, probably with all the emailing and all the messages that you're probably received, you're going to have like both our contacts. So do not hesitate to, you know, like reach out to us separately. It was an absolutely pleasure to have like so many people joining us for a very passionate discussion. And first time we do it together with Sandrine was an absolute pleasure as well.
Absolutely.
So you're going to be able to review that video on our you know, like YouTube account, and we're going to send you on Zoom and everything. So do not hesitate to review it. Contact us if you need anything. We're very happy to help out, and we wish you all a very good day.
Have a good day. Thank you very much.